So in a couple of movies now, I've showed you how to use DDMS to actually view log information that's coming from your device or from the emulator. And this can help you to debug, errors that are occurring, and also just to look at what's going on your device. Now we're going to get into some more traditional type debugging and how you go about debugging your Android applications. So I've created just a blank project here. I've called it debugging. And we're just going to go into the layout. On our Android device. So every time if I hit the home screen, if I do anything on this device, it's actually going to be logging certain information. But I can put my own information in there from my application. And let's go back to our Java code. And to do that, we're going to use the log class. And this is in the android.util package. And there's a bunch of different methods in here that I can use to log stuff to Logcat. I can choose the D method, which is going to send a debug message where I pass in a tag and a message. I can even actually send a throwable object if I want to just log my exception. We have the E method, which actually logs an exception. I logs an info message. V, a verbose message. W actually is a warning. And the funny one down here is WTF, which is actually what a terrible failure. And this is something that's not supposed to happen on the system. It's pretty dramatic. We're just going to use D. Now for the tag, this can be anything just so that I can recognize it in Logcat. So I'm just going to do uppercase Lee. And then I'll just say the button was clicked. So this is going to log it. But what I want to do is I actually want to set a breakpoint here so that it will pause my application and allow me to debug my application. So I'm just going to go into the left-hand column. I'm sure you've done this if you've debugged any code before. I'm just going to double-click it to add a breakpoint. And then I'm going to hit this little bug up here to debug. And we want to run it as an Android application. And now let's go over to the emulator. So when this launches up, it's going to show me my user interface. And there you can see we got a message. It was waiting for the debugger. Basically, it was waiting for the debugger in Eclipse to connect itself to my application. So now they're connected. So now when I click this button, you can see it's automatically brought me to the debug perspective here in Eclipse. Now, depending on what you've done before with Eclipse, it may pop up a message saying, hey, do you want to go to the debug perspective? Just click yes. But since I'm here, now I have all the message, and we can see it down here. The button was clicked. This tag is basically just identifying which process or which application is sending this message. Now, one of the things you'll notice about Logcat is it logs a tremendous amount of information from everything that's happening on the device. Well, what if I only want to see the information coming from my app? Well, I can set up a filter here. Click on this plus sign. I'll just call the filter name Lee by log tag. So if I just want to filter out the messages with the tag of Lee, I can click OK. And now you can see anything that I've logged with Lee is actually shown here. So that's how I log information to Logcat. And now you can see we're still on this breakpoint. And again, I can do all the traditional debug type activities here. So this is great for traditional debugging of my code. But what about the user? Called hierarchy viewer. And this is a batch file on Windows, so I can just double click it. On Mac, you'll have to launch it from the command line. And what this tool does is it shows me all of the applications or processes that are actually running on my device. And in this case, it's the emulator. And here's the application that I want to debug. And I'm going to click Load View Hierarchy. And what this is doing is it's going through and inspecting the user interface of my application. And now it's displaying it in this tree view. Now here I can actually drag things around. I can use my mouse wheel to zoom in and out. But it's basically showing me the structure of my application from a UI perspective. Now you're probably wondering, what are these three colored circles? Well, this represents the performance or how fast this thing has actually rendered. And now there are three steps to that. There's the measure step, where it measures how much space it's going to need. Then the layout step, where it actually lays out things. And then finally the draw step, where it actually, paints it to the screen. And obviously, if you see all green, that's good. And this is just relative to other views in your application. But if you had yellow or, of course, red is going to be the worst, that will then allow you to kind of pinpoint, these are the areas that I need to kind of watch. And in general, when you're creating Android applications, you want to keep your view hierarchy as flat as possible. You don't want tons and tons of nested layouts. But I can also come through, I can click this, and I can see in this wireframe view where this actual button control is laid out. I can also go through all of these properties to find out detailed information about where it's laid out, the size, all of these different properties. I can also double click this to see a kind of a live preview. You can see what it looks like on white background, black, and I can also get some extra information. So definitely recommend you come in here to look at your layout hierarchy, because this can be a really important place to improve the performance of your application. Problems with your code, or if you're creating an application where performance is of the utmost priority, TraceView is definitely a tool that will help you to do that. So that's the basics of being able to debug your application here in a traditional way inside of Eclipse, but then using some of the other tools in the SDK to kind of find performance problems with your layouts.